leaving the land of Egypt and trying to find the promised land. We're all trying to do the same thing. Okay, 17th chapter, verses 1 through 7, as we read in unison. The whole Israelite community set out in the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." And Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. And they said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?" And then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." And the Lord answered Moses, "Walk on ahead of the people. Take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. And I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink." So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel, and he called the place Massa Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled, and because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Interesting scripture, isn't it? Any of you remember, if you're younger, you don't. Remember Joan Baez? She's a great folk singer. She was a famous name in the 60s and early 70s. Several years ago, Joan Baez was in Montreal, Canada, doing a concert. I don't know if she still sings anymore or not, because she's up in years. But anyways, there were a lot of young people at her concert a few years ago, because she has a message and a voice that attracts people of all ages. And she looked at the audience of young people, much younger than her, and she said, "I know a lot of you would like to go back to the 60s, because the 60s were supposed to be great years. Those of you who lived in the 60s, it was turbulent times. There was lots of things going on in college campuses, and the civil rights movement was going. A lot of action out there." And she said, because you want to go back because you think everything was peaceful, love, and freedom. She says, "You are too young. You weren't there. You must remember there was a war going on. There was a draft. You were drafted." And she says the 60s do not look so good when you remember that all the boys were being sent off to Southeast Asia to be killed. That was the 60s. As human beings, I get things on the internet along with this. People send me every now and then. People want to go back to the good old days. I had a couple sent to me in the last 2 weeks about getting back to the good old days. Hey, there were some good things about those good old days, but they weren't all good. There was problems. In fact, in many ways, they're not a lot better than we are today. But we like to think of the good times and not the bad times. See, we like to wipe out all the bad times. Don't even think about it. We're reading a story this morning about a group of people, and you know how many there were of the Israelites that came out of Egypt? Have any idea what the number was? There was around 800,000. 800,000 people coming out of Egypt to find the promised land. They've been in slavery, and Moses is telling them there's a new awareness of who God is, and it's going to be a whole new journey for you from this day on. That sounds good, but it's another thing to see it really, really happen. And Moses was saying to him, in this promised land that we're going to find someday, it's going to be a place that God is going to rule and reign. And it's not going to be built on anybody's greed, or it's not going to be a system where one or two people rule. It's going to be a place where we're all one and God is in command. Doesn't that sound great? But it's hard to make it realistic. See, there's two great things going on in the world today about being religious and being spiritual. And there's a great difference. Being spiritual is where you find yourself with God on your own terms. Being religious is where somebody tells you what to believe, and this is the only way you are to believe. When the Israelites who worshiped in a synagogue, when they came out of Egypt, there was no synagogue. There was no worship center. So they worshiped outdoors. I admire the Amish today because they don't have to maintain church buildings. The New Testament church, they didn't have buildings like we see today for church. They met where? Each other's houses. They had home church worship. 25 people would meet in this house, 25 over there, and so on. They had all these house worship centers. Sounds interesting, doesn't it? In my last parish, I was sharing this on Ash Wednesday. I've only had 2 parishes. In the first parish I had during Lent one year, we did something that you would think is crazy. 20 families in our church moved into each other's houses. So 2 families lived in each house for 40 days. If you don't think that was interesting, you ought to have been part of it. You come to church every Sunday, we see each other for an hour and a half at the most. But to be with another party and live in a house with them for 40 days, I'm telling you, it all come unglued. Your privacy was no longer privacy. But you know what? We learned so much out of it. We learned how to forgive. You had to forgive a lot, I'm telling you, or fight. And we learned how to forgive. We learned how to let things hang loose. It was just a great experience. The house that I lived in was in Poolville. And she was a widow. And she moved in with another family. So my family and another family moved into her house. And we were brave people. Her living room needed to be redone. So we didn't ask her. We just went and got a floor sander and sanded the floor down, got paint and painted the woodwork and put on paper. Invite her down for dinner. Let me tell you, she was some surprised lady. We didn't know if she was going to be mad or glad. She was thrilled. She said, "Oh my God, I could never have done this. I don't have the money. I don't have the expertise. I could never have done this on my own." And it just changed her whole outlook about many, many things. That was just one of the good things that came out of it. We had the permission to correct each other's children. Not to slap them or spank them or all that stuff, but to correct them. And you know, when 2 parents are there and the other set of parents is correcting somebody else's kids, there's a lot of things going on up here. But we learned to be able to live with that and do it. And we saw change. It was a good experience. So what I'm sharing this morning is that I think the spiritual church is much more important than the religious church. I really do. I'd rather be part of a spiritual group than a religious group that tells me you've got to believe the Bible exactly page by page by page. Hey, do you know how many times this Bible's been transcribed and translated? Many, many times. Do you think it's got the original meaning? It does not. When men and women translated this Bible, if you were translating something, there's a tendency in all of us to translate it the way we think, right? So there's a lot of stuff in here that came through people. And people say, "Oh, it all came from God." No, it didn't all come from God. And I'm not deriding the Bible. I'm just saying it is not a book of perfection. It's a guideline. It's got a lot of truth in it, a lot of light, but it's not perfect. See, there's people that worship the Bible. I know of a group of people that if you use anything but the King James Bible, you're going to hell. They're that strong about it. They mean it. The only Bible that was ever written was the King James. Well, the King James was written by English people, not by Hebrew people. So you have to think about some of these things that we deal with again and again. But let's get back to what we're talking about this morning. For change to take place in any of our lives, it takes time, It takes work. You got to work on it. And a major shift in our thinking. One of the things I'm trying to do during Lent, and you can come up like I did to Joe last week and hit him. Say it. One of the things I want you to hit me with is, if I hear me being negative, stop it. Because that's one of the things I'm working on. I'm trying to make no negative statements about anybody. And it's tough. Because that's not my nature. See, my nature is to tell ahead of time that she's going to run for the school board. See? Didn't get permission to do that, but just tell it anyways. Who cared? But I was out of order. See, I got thinking about that after. That wasn't right. I was out of order. And so I thought, okay, I need to be corrected. Whenever you see me saying something that you don't think is right, say, Steve, it's Lent. And I'll get the message. Okay? And so we got an exodus going on. They want to get out of Egypt. And they're out of Egypt. They're hungry. They're thirsty. They don't have enough food. And they said, Moses, when we were in Egypt, we had enough food to eat. We had enough water to drink. We had a job. We had houses. Everybody took care of everyone. And now we're without anything. And it's all your fault. We love to do blame. Blame. Don't we love to blame? Kids do it and adults do it. We love to put the blame on somebody else. It's their fault. They caused it to happen. They made it the way it is. What would happen to you this morning if they took away your cell phone, your tablet, and your vehicle? Huh? You'd be lost, wouldn't you? Hey, just think about those three things. If they took away your cell phone, your tablets, and your vehicle, you think the world would come to an end. You wouldn't know what to do. Wherever I see people today, I was trying to talk to somebody. I stopped to see somebody last week, and I tried to talk to him. It was difficult. There's no manners. You'll have to excuse me for a while. I got to get this message through. It wasn't a message of life and death. Come on. I'm only going to be here 10 minutes. Speak. Talk to me. So when you're upset and angry, your voice sounds it. So they shouted at Moses and they said, Moses, you get us water now. You ever talk like that? You do that now. Right now. I don't want you to ever do that again. You understand that? Don't you ever treat me like that again. That's the way they talked to Moses, their leader. The guy that had gone over the board to get him out of slavery. Now they're saying to him, you either come through and do it on our terms, or by God, we're going back to Egypt. And then we never went without water in Egypt, oh Moses. Now what are you going to do about it? What a different attitude it would have been if they said, gee, the water supply is getting low. Do you think we could get some scouting parties organized and try to go out and search to find some water? Oh, no. When you're angry and mad, you're unreasonable. You can't reason with mad people. Do you know that? They don't hear you. There's so many times in our life when we're not in the mood for solution. We don't want solutions. People say, well, I know what you could do. I don't want to do that. That wouldn't work. Because we want to blame somebody. We love to discharge our pain and our frustration, our anger, on whoever gets in the way. They get it. Haven't you wondered sometimes what you did when you got that barrage? You didn't do anything. They just had to unleash on somebody. And who do we usually unleash on? It's the safest. Our household. Because we know they're going to stay there tomorrow. They have no place to go anyways. Like I said to you, Vestal Goodman always said to Howard, you can leave me anytime you want, but when you go, I go with you. I like that. Yeah. But so a lot of our nastiness comes out in our houses with the people we live with. We say things we would never say to people in church. Such as, I hate you. I wish I never married you. I wish we never had kids. You don't do half the things you promised me you would do. You ever heard some of those remarks? Sure you have. You probably made some of them. We all have. So what did God do through Moses? We want water. God, what am I going to do with these people? They're going to stone me. They're going to put me out of the way. In the desert, according to scientific terms, in the desert there's limestone formations. And where they were in the desert between Egypt and Jerusalem, there's great rock formations of limestone. And if you take anything and hit the limestone, it gushes water because it soaks water in. So he knew what to do. So he went to the limestone, he hit it with his staff, and the water came out. Oh, they said, you're the greatest man we ever knew. Oh, we're so glad we got you for a leader. Oh, we're just wonderful, wonderful that you know how to handle everything. And 5 minutes before, they were going to kill him. You know, sometimes I think if I was God with the Egyptians and the Israelites and you and I would stomp my feet and say, go and do it your own way. Wouldn't you? Haven't you ever had that attitude with certain people that won't listen to you? The hardest thing is patience. To bear with people when they don't like you and don't want to hear you. So they whine. They whine. You ever been around people who whine? W-H-I-N-E, not W-I-N-E. They whine. Oh, ask somebody how they are. Some people you get a long story. It's always usually physical stuff. Oh my God, I got heartburn. I have migraine headaches. My vision isn't as good as it used to be. My hearing is not good. We had years and years ago in my first parish, we used to have Bible study in homes. And we had this lady, she was around 88, 89, and she said she couldn't hear or see a thing. So we were at her house one night for Bible study, and one of our women she worked the night shift as a nurse from 11 to 7, so she usually got very tired. And she would be in a meeting, and so we got ready to go. The woman that could see very little and hear practically nothing, she said, she had her eyes closed most of the night. We're interesting people. We do whine, we do demand. And I think that Moses, rather than call the places where they got the water, he called it Massa and Meribah. He should have called it the place where the people won't stop complaining and won't stop whining. God says this in closing this morning. You can be part of the problem or you can be part of the solution. That's your choice. Right? Part of the problem or part of the solution. Let's be part of the solution.